What's up guys, Justin here with the SketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp quick tutorial for you. So today we're going to talk about how to create a gear in SketchUp without using any extensions. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. So the first thing that's important to understand when you're creating geometry like this is it's important to understand the number of segments in your circles. And so basically what that means is when you draw a circle in SketchUp, if you activate the circle tool by tapping the C key and you look down in the corner, it has an option that says sides and then it gives you a number. Well, that's the number of segments in your circle, because SketchUp doesn't create circles with actual curved lines. What it does is it comes in here and it creates circles made up of a bunch of segments. So like if I come in here and this is set up to do a 24-sided circle, if you come look at this line, you can see how it's made up of a series of straight segments just like this. So in this case there's 24 segments making up this circle. So if I was to come in and type in like 8 and hit the enter key, then I could draw an 8-sided circle, which is actually an octagon. I could come in here and draw a 12-sided circle, but you can see how as I create these, like if I come in here and do a 36-sided circle, you can see how the more segments you get, the smoother it gets. But also if I do something like if I explode this curve and then I push-pull this, you can see how the circle with 36 segments is going to create more faces than the circle with 24 segments, which again is going to have more faces than the circle with 12 segments. And so what happens is the more segments you create, the smoother everything looks, but also the more faces you create when you're modeling like this. So you kind of have to balance that out. Otherwise, you start getting a whole lot of faces in geometry in your model and everything starts slowing down a lot. But in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the number of segments in our circle to affect the number of teeth in our gear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off and I'm going to draw a 24-sided circle, just like this, and I'll give it a radius of 6 inches just for the sake of this exercise. So, and then I'm also going to draw a 36-sided circle also with a radius of 6 inches just to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. And so the way that we're going to create teeth on a gear is we're going to use the offset tool. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to offset this, and we'll go ahead and call it an inch just for the sake of this exercise. And what we're going to do is once we offset this, you can see how both of these circles that we have in here are made up of these segments. And so we're going to draw lines in here to use these segments to create our teeth. And just to note, to activate the offset tool, tap the F key and then just move your mouse inside the circle, click once, and then type in how far you'd like to offset it. So I'm going to type in 1, hit the enter key. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to draw lines along this segment just like this. And so then I'm going to erase out the rest of what I just had right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and you can see how right now the way this would work is this would be a tooth that's wider on the outside than it is on the inside, just because the radius of that bigger circle would have made this bigger. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to select that line. We're going to activate the scale tool by tapping the S key. And you can see how now what I can do is I can hold the control key to scale uniformly, and I can click and drag this little corner box just like this. And so you can see what that does is that makes this line shorter, but the rest of this geometry just kind of sticks to it. And so it makes this kind of gear looking shape just like this. So we'll do the same thing over here. We'll offset this one by 1 inch. We'll do the same thing. We'll draw lines from the corresponding segments just like this, and then we'll erase out the rest. We'll come in here, we'll select this, hold the control key, and scale it just like this. And so you can see how now what you have for both of these is you have one tooth done in here. And you can definitely come in here and make these teeth a little more detailed if you wanted to. Like you could curve them or do whatever you wanted to, but for what we're doing right now, we'll just make these teeth out of straight lines just like this. Well, then what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to double click in this circle to select it. We're going to right click and we're going to go down to this option for find center. And you can see how when you do that, what that does is that adds a little construction point right here in the center of your circle. And that's basically just a point telling you that that's where the center of your circle is. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. And that's really useful because then you don't have to like move your mouse around trying to find the inference point anymore. For the center of the circle, there's just a point that you can always lock to. Like you can see how if I activate another tool just like this, it'll always lock to that tool. Well, now what we're going to do is we're going to select the geometry for this tooth, and we're going to use the rotate tool to copy it. So you're going to come in here and you can either double click in this tooth or you can just drag your mouse across it. Then we're going to activate the rotate tool using the Q key. And before I do this, I'm going to save this because I get a little bit of instability sometimes when I'm working with the rotate tool in copy mode. So once I save a copy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the rotate tool by tapping the Q key. I'm going to move my mouse over the center point and then click on it. And that's going to set the center for where I'm going to rotate this. Then I'm going to click once. And you can see how if I click once with it selected like this, it's moving my circle around. What I want to do is I want to tap the control key and make sure you're clicking on this little intersection point right here along your segment. But we're going to activate this, we're going to click once, and then we're going to tap the control key. And you can see how what that does is that creates a copy along whatever angle I tell it to. So if you look in the corner, you can see how it's telling me 30 degrees, 45 degrees. Wherever I move this, that's going to be the number of degrees that I want to create. And so there's two options here. You could either move this along the next segment just like this, and that would create teeth with a lot less space in between them, or you can move it so that you're skipping a segment. And that's what I'm going to go ahead and do, is I'm going to move this so that I'm skipping a segment just like this. So you can see how this line won't have anything along it. So I'm just going to move this point to the point where I want this to go. Then I'm going to click once to set it, and then I'm going to type in times. And if you remember, this was a 24-sided circle, so I'm going to type in times 12. What that'll do is that'll create 12 copies around this perimeter just like this. And so you can see how now I've got my gears kind of roughed out on here. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Just remember that in this case, this one has 36 sides, so when I do this, I'm going to have to come in here and type in times 18 and hit the enter key to do the same thing. So now that's kind of detailed out as well. And you can see how since this circle has more segments, it has more teeth. So this one has less teeth, this one has more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to erase out all these lines just like this, so that this is all a single piece of geometry. So you can see how now if I was to push-pull that or extrude it just like this, that would create kind of my basic gear shape. Where if you push-pull it without erasing those lines out first, you can see how this doesn't extrude all your teeth. So you need to come in here and erase out all of these lines. So once you've done that, you've got kind of your basic gear shape in here. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to create another circle just like this. And we'll say it has a radius of 3 inches, but let's say this is a gear that's got a hole in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a circle with a radius of 3 inches inside each one of these. And then we're going to delete out the face that's in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to add some holes to this gear. Because a lot of the time gears have different holes or different things to stick through and stuff like that. And the thing that's important to note on this one is that you understand the way that the angles work in this circle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this so that the midpoint, whoops. So I'm going to select this object and I'm going to rotate this so that the midpoint of this segment right here is on the red axis. And that's just going to make it a little easier for me to come in here and make sure everything's centered. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to rotate this so that the midpoint's on the red axis. So another thing to note is you can see how right now this segment isn't really lined up on this red axis as either. So I'm going to come in here and make sure that the midpoint of a segment is also lined up on this red axis, just like this. So that way I can come in here and I can draw a line from this point to this point, and then I can find the midpoint of that to draw where my little circles are going to be. So in this case, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to draw a 3/4 inch circle just like this. And then I'm going to erase out this kind of guide geometry that I had in here. And sometimes what'll happen is this will go on this face, but it won't create a separate face. So you just have to draw a line across it just like this. Sometimes you may have to kind of redraw that circle in here. Well, what we want to do is we want to come in here and we want to create a circle just like this using the circle tool. And then we want to erase out that geometry. And then what's important to note here is now you need to figure out the angle that this goes along, because if you remember, there's 360 degrees in a circle. So what you have to do in this case is you just have to kind of figure out how many copies you want along here. So like for example, if you wanted 10 holes right here, what you would do is you would take 360 degrees and you would basically divide 360 degrees by 10, because that's the number of holes that you want, to give you the number of degrees that each one of these needs to be along to get them equally spaced. So like for example, what I would do is I would come in here, I would select this, I would activate the rotate tool in copy mode, just like this, and then you can see how now what I can do is I can type in the angle that I want this to go along. So if I want 10 copies, that means each one needs to be along 36 degrees. So I'll just type in 36. That'll create my copy 36 degrees from this point right here, and then I'm going to type in times 10. And what that'll do is that'll create 10 copies around here, each spaced at 36 degrees. So you can see how everything's kind of equally spaced in here. So like if I wanted, let's say I wanted 6 copies, then what I would do is I would divide 360 divided by 6. That would give me 60 degrees. So I would select this, I'd activate the rotate tool in copy mode, and then I'd just move this along and I would type in 60. And I would type in times 6 and hit the enter key, and that would create 6 copies just like this. So you can see how, as long as you understand the number of degrees that you're doing this, you can basically make as many copies of these objects as you want, but there is a little bit of math involved in order for that to work properly. So I'm going to go ahead and go with 10 copies just like this, and we can do the same thing right here. So just remember, you got to kind of make sure this circle is lined up. It looks like I got it lined up from before, but you basically want this midpoint lined up on the red axis. You can draw kind of a guideline in here, draw your 3/4 inch circle, and you may have to draw on top of it again, and you may have to try a couple different things in order to get that to merge onto that face properly. But we're going to do the same thing. We'll delete out the center of this, activate the rotate tool in copy mode, we'll type in 36 degrees, type in times 10, and we're good to go. And then now all you need to do is just come in here and just extrude this with the push-pull tool as thick as you want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude both of these to 5/8 of an inch, just like this. So now you can see I've got 2 different gears in here with a different number of teeth based on the number of segments that I had in my circle. And one other thing to note is you can also affect the amount of geometry in your model by affecting the number of segments in this circle. So you can see how each one of these has a whole bunch of faces on the inside of it. That's just more stuff SketchUp has to render, which for a couple gears isn't a big deal, but if you've got tons and tons of stuff in here, you just need to be aware of the geometry that you're creating in your model. So that's where we're going to wrap up today's video. Leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. Can you think of a better way to do any of this? I just love having that SketchUp conversation with you guys. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. If you like what I'm doing in this channel, please consider visiting the Support Me page on my website. That's the SketchUpEssentials.com/support. That has everything from links to some extensions you can purchase to support the show to links to my Patreon page. But in any case, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.